You're listening to Ernestly Speaking, the only weekly podcast that covers friends, foes, and anything that goes. And now, for your badass host, Ernest Owens. And we're back with a special edition episode of Ernestly Speaking with your host, Ernest Owens, myself. This was never the way I planned, not my intention. That is the theme of this special edition episode. That is a lyric, the opening lyric of one of Katy Perry's biggest hits, I Kissed a Girl. But it really do play the theme of this episode because honestly, this was never the way I planned, not my intention. Politics is a very interesting game, unfortunately. I hate to say game. It should be a way of life. It should be a means to an end, but whatever. You work towards something, you plan for something, you operate in good faith. You assume people are going to do what they claim to do politically, but then they don't because they're really not who they say they are. You believe that possibly a couple of their short-sightedness might be what they are, but it's not. And so is the case with Larry Krasner, District Attorney Larry Krasner, Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner. For all of you all listening all over, something happened this week, and I feel like this deserves its own special edition episode. If I do a special edition as a cold red, we need to unpack this. And, I do my podcast every week. You all will get a new episode this upcoming Monday because we're going to have a lot to recap elsewhere. But this deserved its own special edition because I did release a statement recently that I wasn't going to wait until the weekend to do the podcast. I wasn't going to wait, and it's in the moment. A lot is going on. There might be updates, probably for sure, leading into the Monday episode. But this situation that just recently happened, I think deserves its own story, focus episode. And so I'm dropping it. Just like, Beyonce digital drop, we just need to unpack this. And I'm going to keep it 100 because listen, with every story, I have to wait for there to be a conclusion or some level of closure before I tell it. And I had been holding my tongue about this for several weeks. As you all know, I had kind of talked about something maybe coming up. I don't want to put it out there yet because I wasn't 100% sure. And I wanted to, hope that people do what they say they're going to do and let you all know about it. So yeah, where do I start? I mean, a lot of you all saw my statement on Instagram, on social. My DM's been blowing up. They're blowing up even now as I record this episode. But, I just feel like I need to talk in my own words, and tell you the story, the receipts. It's real. It's a lot going on. And a lot of people are heated about it. A lot of people are frustrated about this. The internet is blowing up in these Philly political streets. But here we are. We're a little over a month before the May 20th Democratic primary election, right? And District Attorney, who is a two-term incumbent, Larry Krasner, is going against Judge Pat Dugan. So, let's put some context here. The Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists, which I am the proud president of, we have a history of doing candidate forums, debates, right? We've done this for years. We've been around since 1974, which is 51 years ago. We have historically had mayoral candidate forums. We didn't have other types of candidate forums, and they have been appreciated in the community. The 2023 mayoral candidates forum, which was filmed on CBS 3 with collaborations from Philly Cam and WRD Radio, was considered one of the best debates of that election cycle. It was arguably one of the most watched, I would argue, because it was televised and we had it on Philly Cam, which has their own TV outlet. We streamed it on YouTube and it was on radio. I mean, it was probably one of the most well-received, well-viewed debates of that primary cycle. It's still on YouTube. It's legendary. I was the moderator. We had a great, esteemed, diverse set of panelists, and it was a super success. And we had the Museum of the American Revolution, which they were great. We had it there. We had the Museum of the American Revolution. We had it, in the spring, and this was 2 years ago. And it was such a very magical experience. And so many of you all who listen to this podcast remember that whole entire event. It was magical. And I think that debate helped change the trajectory of the outcome of the election. Because before that debate, a lot of people were not sure who was going to win or who could win. And personally, after that debate, it was very clear to me that Sherelle Parker had a strong chance. Now, you all know I was very fond of Rebecca Reinhart, but I also said to myself, Sherelle is very strong. Like she really stood out. And so I felt in my heart that it was going to be between the two of them. And at the end, it was between Sherelle and Rebecca. Helen Gim at that point really began to phase out. But it was between Sherelle and Rebecca, and Sherelle came on top. This race is different. The DA's race is different. This entire election cycle has been fairly stale. There has not been much excitement. I mean, we don't know much about Pat Dugan. I mean, we know about his record in his campaign, but there hasn't been any, as of the recording of this podcast, any major scandals or anything of that nature. Like when it was Carlos Vega, when it was Krasner, and that was back in 2021, I believe, or 2021, I believe. That was just a different race. And it was just a lot more antics. Krasner was running for re-election for the first time. And it was just a different race. And it seemed to just get a lot of more attention. And I think Carlos Vegas had a lot of interesting skeletons in his closet. It was a lot of drama. And Krasner had a lot of heat. It was just a very interesting election cycle. And it was also that other guy, Peturo, whatever his name was, Chuck or whatever. Woof, that was a lot going on too. That was a very interesting primary. This race, however, has been very quiet. There's been some community forums, but there's been nothing mainstream, nothing that will get the public's attention. And so for several months, PABJ was like, we reached out to CBS Philadelphia. We reached out to WRD Radio. It was like, look, let's bring it back. We should do a candidates forum. And this was, we had this conversation last year, like early last year. I applied for a grant for PABJ. We got money from the Linfest Institute, which the Linfest Institute for Journalism. They have a program called the Every Vote, Every Voice initiative, which is basically they fund programs throughout the city that are interested in media outreach and engagement to inform the public about elections and politics and races. So we got money from them to do the 2023 mayoral debate, which was a super success. And that was the first time they had launched it. And then they've been doing it ever since. And we applied for a grant this time around to do this district attorney's debate. So we had got the money, we secured the venue. It was going to be at the Museum of the American Revolution. And it was scheduled for Thursday, April 24th. Okay, so technically roughly 2 weeks from the time of this recording of this podcast. So in January, we began to start, planning things out. We had locked in the date. The media partners was on board. Word was on board, CBS Philadelphia. We had said, okay, it's happening. There's a DA's race coming. We are going to reach out to the candidates once they declare. We wanted to wait for the candidates to declare so we can lock in the calendar. We want to be as early. We want to be prompt because we started to see things pick up. Human Rights Campaign, HRC, they had a forum in March. We was like, you know what, that's a little too early. We didn't want to do any candidate forums super early because we knew that for the public and for voters, most of the public, most voters began to think about races and elections within a month, like most everyday voters. Now, politicos and journalists and insiders, they're thinking about elections every day, all day. Like, it's all we talk about. Like, I have friends who are elected. I got friends who are in politics. We talk about these races like all the time. It's almost like a daily conversation. I have a really good friend of mine who is a state rep, and we'll talk about a race. We talk about these races like on the day. We hear from campaigns. It's just good tea. But this is what we do, you know? But everyday voters, right? People who are not into the political world, but they show up to the polls, they register to vote, they don't start really getting serious about these races until arguably a month in. That's when endorsements come, major endorsements come out within a month. That is when, you know, a lot of the mainstream media begin to really ramp up coverage. And so we were going to do the forum April 24th because that would have been less than a month away from the May 20th primary election. So that was the plan. That was, and I talk in past tense because at this point you all know what it was, what the T is. So that is what, you know, that was the plan. Museum American Revolution, you know, we had the grant money, you know, we make the deposit, we got food, we got snacks, we was going to have a cocktail reception, no alcohol, okay, but a snack reception, I guess we call it. Non-alcoholic beverages, snacks, it was going to be a little mingling hour with the candidates. We was going to have that, then the candidates were going to get on, we was going to mic them up, we were going to have a 1 hour debate, we was going to knock it out, it was going to be a moment. And then it will be live streamed on WRD Radio, which is one of the few Black-owned radio stations in the country. Word was going to put it on their broadcast, and then we were going to air it on CBS Philadelphia. It was going to stream, and then they were going to also run it on their YouTube channel, so it was going to be able to be seen for voters to be able to make a very informed decision. We know the power of TV, right? Articles, they have their traffic, but nothing like TV, where you're in thousands of households in a major market, right? We were the first. Let me be very clear. This WRD, CBS3, PABJ collaboration, we were the first televised debate to reach out to the candidates, okay? NBC 10, Fox 29, 6ABC, none of them had reached out to these candidates before we did. We reached out to these candidates, I want to say the first week of March, late February, the moment that Krasner officially declared, okay? Because we did not want to reach out to him before he was officially a candidate. So Krasner had announced his candidacy in February, I believe, and we reached out around then, if not sooner. We reached out very, very early, okay? So we're talking late February, early March at the very latest, but we was on top of it. We had the venue, we had the date, we had the time, we had the setup, we had the format, we had everything. We were on top of our shit. Something happened. Y'all know what happened. I wrote a story that no one's doubting is true. I mean, at this point, it was true. The story is that Krasner was at a 52nd Ward event in February. That was a candidates event, a mixer for some candidates, and the ward leader at the time was convicted child pedophile Stephen Jones. Now, Stephen Jones is a man that is in his late 70s, early 80s, around that age. I think he's 79 right now, about to turn 80. He's probably 80 now because I think his birthday's in April. He's an old man. But he was convicted of sexual abuse to a minor. Reportedly his granddaughter, but definitely an underage girl. An inappropriate sexual misconduct. Okay? Facts. This man was convicted by a prosecutor in District Attorney Larry Krasner's office. Fact. Krasner claims he did not know. The campaign put out a statement saying that the name is a very common name. It was no way that Krasner, they tried to argue that Krasner may have not known it because the name Stephen Jones is a very common name. There has been some criticism on that because of the very nature of the way that trial went out. Begging the question, how would Krasner may have not known, potentially, given the level of this particular situation. So let me back up and give you context. In 2003, Stephen Jones was arrested and charged. Okay? This man went through multiple trials. The first trial was a hung jury. Once there was a hung jury, he had to then there had to be another trial. Now, he had a prosecutor this entire time that was in Krasner's office. One would argue that, okay, you tried a man. The first time he gets put on trial, there's a hung jury. Red flag. Who is this Stephen Jones man? Like, we need to figure out what's going on here. Maybe, right? In the process of him going through his second trial, they're trying to get a judge. Several judges, several democratically elected judges in Philadelphia recused themselves from this trial, stating a political conflict of interest. Why? Because these judges that recused themselves know Stephen Jones, because Stephen Jones was a ward leader in the 52nd Ward. There has been speculation. I have not been able to get the document myself, but there's been speculation that Stephen Jones identified himself as a ward leader on some type of deposition paperwork that throughout this process, that apparently him being a ward leader could have not been a surprise, because judges and the courts were definitely talking. So much that Democratic City Committee leader, the chair, Bob Brady, said that he was aware that Stephen Jones had some legal problems, but he claims he was not aware that it was for child pedophilia, it was misconduct with a child. Some people will call that bullshit. I'm just telling you what the man has said in articles. So it's really, with this information as context, you got several democratically elected judges recusing themselves, multiple, stating that there was a political conflict of interest. If I'm the prosecutor working on this, is it really, would that prosecutor not notify the DA to say, this man that we're trying to prosecute, this Stephen Jones guy, he's got something's up with him. We need to look up into, like, what's going on? There is no way, in my opinion, I don't know, maybe anything can be possible, but it's really hard for me to believe that there wasn't some awareness of who this man was within the DA's office. But that's what they're claiming. As a journalist, as somebody who has common sense, I don't necessarily know if I believe that to be true. But I'm a critical thinker. I'm an educated, informed thinker. And I've covered scandals, political crisis, all kinds of issues. And I just find this to be interesting. Nonetheless, the story came out. The ward leader was asked to leave. He stepped down within the time in which I broke this story. Remember, I broke it on a Sunday. At the time in which I broke this story, Krasner's campaign, I didn't know who was Krasner's campaign director. His campaign manager, his director, his comms person. Matter of fact, they did not include me on any press. And this is before I broke the story. So his comms team sent press releases inviting the press to his announcement. I was not included on any of that press information. I did not know who his spokesperson was. I don't know who his campaign manager was. All of this happened really fast. When his campaign spokesperson told me that that they got hired very quickly in the mix, that they did not include me. They said that it was not intentional, yada, yada, yada. All I will say is that when I broke this story, that same day, I got the statement from Krasner's team, his campaign. One could argue, how convenient. What a coincidence. What I will say is that I did share the statement. I did, let the public know what had happened. When I broke this story, I didn't have Krasner's contact information, and I also did not have his comms team. And also, there was confusion on who his comm director was in his main office versus his campaign. It was complicated. But as a journalist who breaks news, everything I posted was factual. The information I provided was the information I provided. And I will tell you, as you all know, in this world of access journalism versus adversarial journalism, when a particular political figure is being called to the ground under the carpet, they will get ahead of a story by tipping off other members of the press before you. They will either try to silence or potentially shut down anybody who you might be contacting in the midst of this story breaking, because there were multiple parts to this story, and the story was not fixated on Krasner solely. There were other people that were arguably, quote unquote, implicated, like the 59th Ward, right? The members, the chair, the leaders. There was video footage that was put out. From what I heard, and what I will find out later, is that Krasner, of course, was not happy that I did my job as a journalist and report on this story. We'll get to that in a minute. But nonetheless, broke a story, did my job. Local outlets covered it. Several media outlets covered it. And, it was simply what it was. And so there's a lot. There's a lot here. There's a lot of layers here. And the campaign, I'm thinking about the words I want to use, because I cannot tell you how many times I have replayed how I want to say this verbally. Writing, it's easy because you can write something, I'm good with my words. I put thought into what I write because I know that I want to convey the message. Sometimes though, we're just gonna let this podcast roll because so many thoughts. So the story comes out, the news is out, Dugan talks, Krasner talks, everybody's reaching out to them. Stephen Jones is no longer a war leader. We took a convicted pedophile out of a war seat. So I don't have any regrets about the journalism I did, because at the end of the day, it's the people that I work for. I don't work for a political candidate. I don't work for a political party. And I think sometimes people forget that. I don't regret breaking that story. I don't regret informing the people like I did, because had I worked within these institutions, you just never know. And I understand even more, because I'm going to get to why I see why certain mainstream media and certain institutions, what happens when we stand on business and we have integrity. So just want to put that out there. So in this process, I had decided that I was not going to directly reach out to the campaigns because I was covering them in a way. And I also felt like if I was the one to be the one to reach out to them directly to come on the forum, that it would have not looked like I had the leadership that I had involved, right? So what was agreed upon was that because CBS Philadelphia was a major media partner in this, it would make sense for them, because they're going to be doing the format, they're going to be doing the TV, they were going to be really doing a lot of the broadcasting aspects of it, that it would make sense for their leadership to be at the helm of reaching out to the candidates. Now, to be clear, we were going to have talent on the panel that was going to include journalists from PABJ, journalists from CBS 3, and journalists from WRD. Like, there was going to be a collaborative effort of diverse talent that was going to be involved in this process. This is exactly what we did in 2023. We were going to bring the same energy, the same level of integrity, transparency, organization to it. We've done forums before. I am not new to doing a candidates forum, okay? I have done it for the Committee of 70. I've done it for WRD. I've done it for CBS Philadelphia. I've done candidate forums before. I am not new to this. I am true to this. So it's very insulting when I'm going to tell you what happens later, but it's very insulting when people try to really play with you like you don't know how this works. It's very condescending, and we're going to call it what it is. It's racist. And we're going to talk about why it's racist. Because there's a double standard that happens to Black journalists like myself who do the type of journalism that I do. Because let me be very clear. What people will do is they will cherry pick and say, no pun intended, they will cherry pick and say, oh, this journalist, we they're Black. And it's like, wait, not all Black journalists are the same, right? They're not. And we're going to talk about what white politicians do. right? In these situations and what history has taught us about what has happened in the past. Because this sounds very familiar because it is very familiar. So CBS Philadelphia was reaching out. We Philadelphia, PABJ, Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists, and CBS Philadelphia, we had drafted the letter to reach out to the candidate. So we agreed on the terms, we understood the partners, we understood the format, and we drafted the letter to be sent. The leadership from CBS Philadelphia sent out the producers. So it was very clear that it was not just the Ernest Owens show or the PABJ show, that there was a collective and a collaborative effort. Everybody, all the major stakeholders on the media front was all aware of the date, the location. We were keeping in touch with each other. I was in communication with WRD Radio. Everybody was in communication. We were ready to go. The museum knew the format. The museum knew what we were doing. Everybody was involved. Linfest, we applied for the grant. We told them what they were doing, what we were doing. They gave us the money. Everything was lock, step, and key. So in early March, the narrative was, at the time, from Krasner's campaign spokesperson, was that, several, and let me, because we got some, we gonna roll this all the way back. Krasner's team had told CBS Philadelphia, had told our partners that, Krasner's got a lot of different people hitting him up. There's a lot of people reaching out to him to participate in this debate. And see, I have a timeline. I keep receipts. I saw Krasner in March at City Council. This was after I broke the story about the Stephen Jones situation. We saw each other. I shook his hand. It was very professional. And I let him know, I said, hey, our team reached out to your campaign folks about a candidates forum, and we want to, and I looked this man in the face, because I don't run from anybody. I said, we would love you to participate. He was like, we got to see. It's not a no. It's not a yes. We got a lot of different TV stations reaching out to us. NBC 10, I think somebody from 6 ABC. A lot of TV stations are reaching out to us, so we got to figure out what we can do and what we can commit to, because we can't do all of them. And I'm just like, okay, I understand, In my mind, I was like, he's lying. I'm going to tell you why in a minute. But I was like, okay. Well, look, hopefully get back to us. That was the framing. That was the way that conversation started in early March. Meanwhile, Pat Dugan immediately agreed to the debate. Judge Pat Dugan was like, look, we invited him. We told him location. His team was very much like, we're down, keep us posted. We're with it. We're with it. Okay. So in my mind, I'm like, Pat Dugan's agreed to it. He wanted, he's okay. So we got one. Krasner, okay, we got to get Krasner now. So I'm thinking maybe it's going to take a week or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. It got really weird. So first they were asking questions about the format. We sent them the format. The format was going to be what we did at the Mayoral Candace Forum. There was going to be opportunities for them to rebuttal. It was going to be a space. There was going to be questions that was going to be asked from the panelists. I was going to moderate it. My co-moderator was from CBS Philadelphia, Natasha Brown. Like, we were going to have a very free-flowing conversation. Everybody was going to get their points across. We were going to cover a variety of topics and issues. We knew what we were doing because we've done it before. After he got the format, it becomes a question of, well, who's going to be the moderators? Who's going to be the whatever? Okay, they sent him the moderators and the panelists. They told him I was going to be one of the moderators. I wasn't going to be the only moderator, but there was going to be me and another. We was going to co-moderate it. They told them who the panelists were, which was a diverse panelist group. They were from CBS Philadelphia, some word. Some of them were PABJ members. We had this already lined up. We told them that this was not going to be a situation where the public can ask questions so that we can prevent any heckling. We were very transparent about everything. Simple, fair. They heard it. They received it. There was no complaints. There was no raising of the flag of like, oh my goodness, we got an issue with this. Everything was just, they was receiving everything. It was like, we're going to review this. We're going to review it. So during that time, I know people from all the TV stations, okay? NBC 10, 6 ABC. I know these players. I'm like, yo, y'all trying to do a TV debate? People from 6 ABC told me, no, we're not doing the televised debate. Where you hear that from? NBC 10, no, they were not doing a televised debate for them. Fox 9, at the time in the beginning, they weren't trying to do anything. It wasn't until maybe about 2 weeks ago I heard that Jeff Cole had reached out and was trying to do a sit down with Krasner and Dugan where they were gonna debate. He was gonna moderate it, but he was gonna run it like late at night. They're gonna film this with no studio audience, no crowd, and they were gonna run it. They were gonna run it like late at night. That was the plan with that. But there was no confirmations on whether or not they were going to do it. But that was one TV station that proposed. But it was not going to be on the level and magnitude of what PABJ, CBS Philly, and WRD Radio was going to do. We was the first to present this plan. We came to them a month in advance. We had our shit together. We had a venue, a location. So then we hear that maybe about 2 to 3 weeks ago, WHRY Studio 2 with Cherry Gregg and Avi Wolfman, Arndt, that they wanted to have both of the candidates for their podcast or show. Again, this is radio. No shade, but it's like, it's not on the scale and magnitude of what PABJ, WRD, and CBS Philadelphia was bringing to the table. Initially, that was in the air, but then there was a shift where it became a partnership with the Philadelphia. It was the Committee of 70. It was I remember the Committee of 70 was a part of that. It was also the Philadelphia Bar Association with the Committee of 70, and that I guess WHRY was going to be in the mix at this point. And they were trying to do something similar, except there was no confirmation whether it was going to be televised and how they were going to plan to air this or package this outside of the way they were. Because they didn't have a major TV, outlet or contributor. It was kind of like they were going to record this on a broadcasting tip and run it, but there was no confirmations on logistics. But they were planning to do something similar to this maybe about 2 to 3 weeks ago. Mind you, we had been in conversation with the campaigns long before. So it got weird because last week I got contacted by people involved in that process that had said WHRY is going to do a debate or do some type of forum with them on April 22nd. And I was like, with Krasner and Dugan? They said yes. And that the word on the street was that Krasner was telling people that he was not doing this debate with PABJ, CBS 3, and Word. That this debate wasn't happening, that they weren't doing it. Even though the campaign team was still giving us communication saying that nothing had been confirmed. That they were trying to listen to other folks that was proposed. They had so many people proposing things and they weren't confirming anything. Mind you, I'm sitting here looking like they just had the April 22nd date confirmed by a week ago. Because see, people be lying and I got to get receipts. They were trying to do it on April 17th or something like that, April 15th to 17th. But somebody told them that's around Passover, Easter. You can't do that. They didn't even have their dates together. So then they moved it to April 22nd. Mind you, April 24th was already on the calendar for PABJ. We had already locked this in for months. But there was some adjusting with the schedules. And I'm like, well, why would you be working with adjusting schedules if that's not a confirmed debate? But see, this is what happens when people lie and they don't tell the truth because receipts are receipting. So I'm finding this out last week that they were going to pull this okie doke. I'm still like, you know what? Don't say anything. Fall back. Let the folks discuss it. Maybe there's I don't want to assume the worst, but I had already knew as of last week what the plan was going to be, even before Krasner's team had tried to create a lie and try to pull an okie doke. They were negotiating dates because they didn't even have a date. And so basically what the plan was, in my opinion, was that Krasner did not want to do the debate. We're going to get there. He didn't want to do the debate because there was no other competitive outlet. So he had to create one, bring in the partners, right? Get this set up where he can find a scapegoat to reject this forum because he needed to find something of what he would consider equally balanced because this debate was manufactured. This was not supposed to be the way it was going to be initially. Somehow we start off with Studio 2 doing their own thing. Then next thing you know, all of a sudden, you got the Philadelphia Bar Association, the Committee of 70. Now it becomes this other forum. And it's like, well, wait a minute. How did they formulate that? How did that come together? Because you were trying to manufacture and formulate something to make an alternative so you can duck and dodge the Black Journalist Forum. That's cute. Nice try. So Pat Dugan, his campaign, thought, okay, April 22nd on Tuesday, that's fine. We'll do that debate. And clearly the one on April 24th is happening, right? So the Krasner campaign reaches out to us, I want to say, at the beginning of this week. So I want to say that they said, we're going to give you a final answer by Thursday night. We're still trying to wrap things up. We don't hear anything. No, they said Tuesday night. Let me back up because today when we record this is on Thursday, 2 weeks before the event. They told us that we were supposed to find out like Tuesday night. That this past Tuesday night we was going to find out the final answer. They were trying to wrap things up. They were sorry for the delay. They finally tell us Thursday morning, 2 days later, after they were called on Wednesday, multiple people called them Wednesday, no answer, no reply, no answer, no reply. They finally call us on Thursday, around maybe 10 a.m., 11 a.m., and tell us that they've reached out. And I'm going to tell you exactly what his spokesperson said. Good morning. Apologies that our process has taken so long. We really appreciate the invitation to a debate, but have decided to proceed with another debate proposal. Thanks so much for your commitment to covering the race, and I'm sure we'll be seeing your news teams out in the field covering the campaign as it progresses. I quickly contacted the other campaign. I called Krasner's campaign, his spokesperson, no answer. Did not hear anything. And it's disgusting because it's disgusting because of the fact that, you know, it's what's crazy about it is that you're backing out of the debate because of the fact that you did not want to have this conversation. And it's cowardice to me because I'm thinking to myself that for all of the things that's happened, yeah, it's frustrating. It's frustrating. My phone has been blowing up. So let me get back. I just got a message. It's so many people sending me all this tea, which I will read on air. I won't name names. So anyway, the debate, we get this email, and I'm just sitting here looking like this don't seem right because I'm trying to figure out who's the other debate proposal. I knew who the players were. So I contacted the other campaign. I said, hey, just want to let you all know, common courtesy, that the debate is being canceled. Krasner is backed out the debate. He's not going to do it. It's 2 weeks before the event. At this point, I have to figure out, you know, because I'm the lead coordinator through PABJ, we got to coordinate. We got to give, you know, every voice, every vote. Linfest, we got to give them their money back. They gave us a grant. We got to give them their money back. We got to close everything down with the venue. The Museum of American Revolution. We got to close everything down with the venue and, you know, work that out. I got to let all the media partners know. Everybody needs to know what's going on because we had cleared our calendars out for this debate. All the time and effort we put into this, we gotta figure this out. So I contact the Dugan campaign to let them know, hey, this debate's not happening. They were confused because I said to them, I said, listen, apparently you all are going to do a debate. It's just not going to be the one. Which debate did y'all agree to? And they said, well, we agreed to WHRY one. I said, well, apparently that's the debate that, Krasner's willing to do. So, it is what it is. They were like, well, that's messed up because we been agreed to you all's debate. You all reached out to us for weeks. The WHRY debate offer just came to us like about a week or so ago. We just finally locked in details around that like a week ago. And I was like, I was like, wait, I'm confused. What you mean? Because to be clear, Krasner's campaign person said they didn't confirm the debate. They contacted us 3 minutes after they confirmed the debate with WHRY. And I'm still a little confused about that because I'm like, you confirmed the debate with WHRY 3 minutes before you rejected our invitation? Huh? That didn't make sense. So then I'm gonna let the chopper out tonight, y'all. I'm gonna have to let it out because I gotta tell the truth to shame the devil. So I gotta name names. So Dugan's people, they were like, we just found out we've been agreed to this last week. We knew this was coming, so why are they acting like this is a new thing? So they're very disgusted. They're very upset at this point. They're pissed off. And so their campaign sent an email notifying the Philadelphia Inquirer, notifying myself, notifying all of our media partners. In this email they send with the Krasner campaign, the guy named is Josh, who is the campaign manager for Krasner. He directly says in this email that he puts the Dugan campaign, the campaign manager's named Dan. Dugan's campaign manager puts all of these media people on it. And he says, Josh, your reason for declining the CBS April 24th debate is because both of our campaigns recently committed to the Committee of 70 Philadelphia Bar Association on April 22nd over the last week. You dragged your feet on committing to CBS, although they invited both campaigns on March 4th as the first network to do so in partnership with Word and the Philadelphia Association of Black Journalists. We committed on March 5th to the only live broadcast network debate because it is important to give millions of voters every opportunity to hear directly from the candidates to make an informed decision in the spirit of democracy. The real reason is because Larry doesn't like Ernest Owens. It is my understanding CBS and organizers did everything they could to cater to Larry's many demands. You know who else pulled out of the debate and wouldn't agree to debates with organizers he didn't like or agree with? Hint, he drives a Tesla like Larry, rhymes with rump. It is well known that Larry has turned down several other opportunities offered to Larry to have to defend his record in front of voters. Because of his gamesmanship, Judge Dugan will only participate in WHRY April 22nd if both campaigns agree in writing to CBS live broadcast debate and Fox taped candidate forum. Millions of voters deserve the opportunity to hear from both candidates directly on their vision for public safety. What is Larry afraid of? Ball is in your court. Thank you, Dan, campaign manager, Judge Dugan for DA. So he spilled the tea and basically said that they had agreed on this shit last week. So my whole mindset is there's a lot to unpack in that email, and we're going to unpack it together. But I'm sitting here thinking to myself, so what are we going to do? Like, so hold on. So the campaign, the Krasner campaign tells me that they agreed to the debate the same day they rejected ours. But now I'm hearing that, y'all actually confirmed this shit a week ago. So what was you doing stalling this process? Interesting. So, several things you should know. The Dugan campaign has publicly said, it's reported in Inquirer, that they're no longer going to do the debate show while debate. They're standing on business. They said, look, if you're not going to do the televised debate, we're not going to let you cherry pick and formulate what kind of debates you want to do. You're not going to be able to dictate the terms of this situation. Yes, Krasner is the incumbent. Yes, Krasner has a very strong likeliness to winning re-election. He's a 2-time incumbent. But at the end of the day, I'm going to keep it all the way 100. It's not about what you do, it's how you do it. If Krasner does not like me, and we're going to get to that because there is some tea there. But if Krasner didn't want to do this debate, respectfully, he could have said that on March 5th. He could have said that in early March. He could have just said, look, we're not going to do the debate. We don't like Ernest. It is what it is. Fuck it. And if he would have did that, guess what would have happened? We would have had time to coordinate a whole different televised program. We would have been able to get our dates. We would have had maybe judicial candidates. We would have did a whole different forum. But because it's so close and because we've already put so much labor in doing this, we're just not going to do it because we can't get both candidates to confirm. It's a wrap. It is what it is. But it's the principle. This is what cowardice looks like. This is what someone having a tyrannical fit looks like. This is what folks that's drunk off their arrogance and their power do. And it's disgusting because it's like, you could have just kept it 100. If you you got all this fuck around and find out energy. You say fuck around and find out to Trump. You talk about all this. You got all this smoke for other folk. But you didn't have the integrity, the courage, and the decency. As a grown man, when you saw me in March, you could have simply said, yeah, I'm not going to do that. You know why. It would have been fucked up. It would have been petty. But you know what? I would have had a little bit of respect because you would have been clear. Look, I've dealt with several opponents in elected officials who do not want a outspoken, intelligent, articulate black man like myself that stand on business and do what I do. I have had many white men like Larry Krasner throughout my entire life tell me no because they didn't want to deal with the smoke. There's something about me and my unapologetic realness, my honesty, my transparency, my courage, my audacity that educated white men like Larry Krasner don't like. I don't care if they're conservative. I don't care if they're liberal. I don't care if they're progressive. White educated men like Larry Krasner do not like black men like me because they're used to black people being submissive to them. Submissive and subservient to them, meaning that it's not that those people are not educated. It's just that if you're not kissing their ass, if you're not telling them everything they want to hear, they have no use for you. They see you as an enemy because they also see you as somebody that can humble them and get them together, and they don't want that. Because how dare you? How dare you, you uppity Negro? How dare you have an opinion? How dare you, you young, black, confident, articulate black man who got their facts and receipts together? How dare you challenge me? I know men like Larry Krasner. I've dealt with men like Larry Krasner my entire life. I went to Ivy League schools. I have been in the top schools. I know white men like Larry Krasner. They're the white liberal men who know the issues, woke on the issues, but heaven forbids that the black person in the room that is just as smart, that know the games, that don't do, oh, thank you, Larry. Thank you, Larry. Oh, thank you, Larry. You're so good to us people. Because I don't do that. Because I don't concede to him. Because I don't kiss his ass. There's no place for smart black men like myself. There's no place for black men like myself that are critical thinkers. To be clear, I don't hate this man. I don't hate Larry Krasner. I think Larry Krasner has some great policies. I think some of his ideas are smart. But the issue I have with him, and the issue I have with people like Helen Gim, is that these are non-black people that think they know what's good for black people, and heaven forbids any of us push back on it. Because Larry Krasner spent his entire political career as a white savior. He is the man that can do no wrong. If you say you disagree with his policies, people will look at you and say, you don't support equal liberty. This is a man who said that he told black women in a forum that they're more freer under his leadership. Free? You Moses? Excuse me? Freer? Interesting word choice. But this is the type of arrogance. This is the type of ego. He's not a humble servant. He's not. He's not a humble servant. He's not looking at his privilege in a way to say, you know what, I am doing good things, but that does not make me feel superior in a way that I can't be challenged. Because let's be clear about white progressives like Larry Krasner. Based on my identity, right, I'm a black queer millennial. Black queer millennials in Philadelphia are supposed to be in awe of Larry Krasner, demographically. I do recognize Larry's contributions. I can't take that from him. But the biggest issue I've had with him is that he is somebody who does not think his shit stinks sometimes. He lies. He's not transparent all the time. He doesn't have humility often. There are situations where he literally will walk past you if he has no use for you. And I am the type of person that, because I've worked and operated in progressive spaces for most of my life, I know an arrogant, white, pompous progressive when I see one. And yes, his policies can make an impact on Black people, but if he thinks that we are not to criticize or to give him legitimate concern, it's a problem. And I think we see the arrogance of politicians the worst when it comes to the free press. Because in this terrain that we're currently in, the free press is under attack. And they're not only attacked just by conservatives, they're under attack by people in power. Whether they're Democrats or Republicans, people in power. There has been so much suppression of my First Amendment right of free speech that have come from Democrats, more than they come from Republicans in Philadelphia, of course. You all forget that Mayor Jim Kenney, okay? Mayor Jim Kenney, right? He wants to create all these progressive policies, right? He wants to be this advocate, right? I had no access to the city. I did not get a press pass. I had no access. They did not accept me to get a press pass to cover him. I had to come in the building, long lines, where all of my white colleagues that were journalists at the Inquirer and other places, WHRY, had press access. I was denied it. I was denied it under the Kenney administration. 8 years. I did not have a press pass to insert and cover the mayor administration. I had to use the Kenney administration. I had no ability. I had to basically come in as a guest, and I didn't have seating. I had to literally come with my phone and my notepad. He didn't answer any of my questions. I know what it's like. Been there. Okay? And he's not the only elected official who's done this to me. So let me be very clear. I've dealt with this before. Covering campaigns, not getting press releases, taking off a press list because I wrote an article or I covered something they didn't like. Yes, retaliation. And this is happening from elected officials. My whole thing is with the cowardice of this, the lack of courage, right? Is that if you feel so convicted in your policies and your platform, you shouldn't give a fuck about a journalist asking you any questions. The system is rigged. The system is rigged when you get to cherry pick who you let in the room and who you don't. This is very Trumpian. Trump does this. He's doing it right now. He would not let the Associated Press get access because they wouldn't call it the Gulf of America. Krasner does not want to do this forum with me because of the fact that I did my job and I covered him and looked like his complicity with something. He did not like the uncomfortable position he was in. And so when we get to a point where elected officials, whether they're Democrats or Republicans, cherry pick who they want to be accountable to and how they want to engage, it's interesting. And what's very interesting is the fact that it's always Black journalists that oftentimes get this type of dealing with. You all remember that when I spoke out against the mummers, the Philadelphia Police Department interrogated me in the counterterrorism unit. Okay, so this is not new for me. And why me? I'll tell you why. Because I am one of the few Black political journalists in this city that do aggressively and consistently cover these elected officials. I don't play softball with them. I don't kiss their ass. I really do hold them to account. I ask tough questions. I am fair. I am balanced. I will give anybody a platform to engage and discuss. There's no, you could say, oh, he likes this person. And then you'll turn around and say, oh, shit, he said this. Listen, I'm fair. When you do good, I'm going to say you do good. I'm never going to dismiss it. Krasner has done good things. I will not dismiss that. But Krasner's also done some fucked up things. And unfortunately, Krasner wants 24/7 ass kissing. I'm not doing it. And so how do I know all of what I'm telling you? Is because I did speak with a member of his campaign. And his campaign was very transparent and told me that they did not like the way I went about covering the story pertaining to the Stephen Jones situation. They told me that definitely played a role in them making the decision they made. I explained to that campaign representative that this isn't just about me, but you are talking about a group of other journalists that have the access and platform. They told me, well, we do have a black journalist. I said, well, who's the black journalist that you are talking to? Well, we're talking to Cherry Gregg. Cherry Gregg, I guess, is going to be the moderator for this. And so they said, I said, well, first of all, tokenizing a black journalist and weaponizing a black journalist against another journalist in this type of way is disgusting. But like the whole idea of comparing that forum to our forum is also intellectually dishonest, right? Let's be clear. Cherry Gregg is not an investigative journalist. Cherry Gregg has not been intently covering and breaking any stories pertaining to this race. Cherry Gregg does interviews, but they're often on the more positive, light, soft side. She's not asking tough questions. And this is no shade. This is no diss. Everybody has a lane. Everybody do the work that they do. But no one is thinking to themselves, I want a serious conversation and interview with Cherry Gregg on tough issues, and I'm going to be held accountable, and that is going to be an interview. We're not the same. And that's no shade. There's no shade. There are certain people that should definitely talk to Cherry Gregg. If I'm a nonprofit leader and I'm creating a great program, good souls, good spirit, all of that, and I want to talk about community uplift, I would talk to Cherry Gregg if I was a nonprofit leader doing some really good in the community, because that's typically the type of journalism that she currently do. She does nice interviews. She doesn't, you never get there's no viral interview that Cherry Gregg has done that is in recent memory where it's like, oh my goodness, this is a viral interview where she, hammered this person on this issue. She's not that type of reporter, and that is okay. But this is a serious DA Candace forum. And it's one thing to moderate a very neutral, soft conversation, and it's another to be in conversation where you're dealing with very, very tough issues, very controversial issues where a person's going to lie and you have to counter that and you have to be ready to hold them to account. That is my track record. That is what I do. That's what my work is. If you want to play softball, yeah, that's where you go. And there's a reason why he was comfortable with doing that forum or doing the forum with Cherry Gregg, because he thinks he's going to get a soft interview. He knows it's going to be a very super, super pleasant space. And it's not Cherry's fault. I have no qualms with her on what she do. But if you all think or thought, because at this point, Pat Dugan's not doing it, if you all thought that was going, listen, even Ray Charles, even Stevie Wonder knows that the forum that PABJ was going to host with the players we were going to host with would have been in stark contrast to whatever the Committee of 70 was going to do with Krasner, and a lack of, I don't know who else was going to be in that forum, but it wasn't giving what it was giving. We know that. Everybody knows that. Like Kristen Welker interviewing Trump is not the same as you can fill in the blank. You can fill in the blank. I would compare it like this. If Alex Holly interviewed Larry Krasner, it's not going to be the same as if Kristen Welker interviewed Larry Krasner. It's not to say that Alex Holly is not a good journalist. It's just to say that Alex Holly That's not her forte. So it's going to be a very different type of interview. Everybody has to know their forte in their lane. It's just not the same. It's not the same. It's not going to come with it, because the reality is that there's a reason why Krasner chose not to come to this forum, because he did not want the presumed smoke of facts. I have covered this race from the very beginning. I have been breaking stories. I have been deeply following this in a way that any little thing, that's what a journalist do. I'm in a different terrain of where the giants in the shoulders of the giants I follow. There is a very different way that people want it. And what a fucking missed opportunity that this man would say to me, oh, we're talking to a black juror, we're talking to Cherry Gray. How insulting that you would compare the type of work that I do to someone who does something completely different. And it's insulting because you think that black people are interchangeable. So you're telling me that, oh, it's like saying, oh, we're going to do an interview with Wendy Williams instead of doing an interview with Oprah Winfrey. It's not the same. It's not the same. And the reason why I say this, and what this reminds me of, because now we got to keep it 100. It is 2025. This reminds me of Biden. You know, right before Biden dropped out, remember the controversy at WRD with Andrea Lawful Sanders and how the Biden campaign cherry-picked a particular reporter at WRD, a journalist. Well, we'll say media personality. That might be more appropriate. They picked that media personality to do that interview with Biden. The questions were pre-written. The questions were fed. The questions were in communication with the Biden team. These are no-nos. Somebody would say, well, why did he pick that individual? He picked that individual because he knew that the interview was not going to be the same if he interviewed with me or, other, journalists and reporters who have covered the politics, right? Denise Clay Murray, who was a political reporter in Philadelphia. The kind of interview that Denise Clay Murray would have done with Biden compared to what Andrea Lawful Sanders did would have been very different. And I say this not to be insulting. It's a fact. And so what we got to be real about is that we are seeing a trend of politicians, specifically white men, that will cherry pick who, no pun intended, would cherry pick who they want to be in conversation with because they feel like they can dodge accountability. There's a reason why Jim Acosta was not allowed to be in the press corps covering Trump. Jim Acosta was a former CNN reporter who was very, very deep and on Trump's ass. He covered Trump with tenacity, with focus and precision. He knew it. And Trump didn't like him. Trump made sure he didn't kick him out. CNN blackballed him and didn't renew his contract. That's what they do. And what we see in this current day and age is that outspoken, courageous journalists that know their shit, that speak truth to power, there is a trend to silence them or to blacklist them and to keep them out. And so now we're seeing elected officials, Democrats and Republicans, weaponize their power and their access to try to dictate and cherry pick who gets to ask them questions and who don't. Because there's a reason why he did not want me to do the forum with him. Because he knew that I knew my shit. And he wanted to go to someone who did not know it as much. And the insult to say, oh, well, we have a black journalist. To act like the black journalists that were going to be on this panel who have been following this race, because it was not just me, y'all. I was the moderator. Let me be very clear. I was the moderator. He didn't even want me to be the fucking moderator. There's a reason why he did that. And so they ran to WHRY. They entertained this shit to coordinate this because they wanted to dodge accountability. What are you hiding, Krasner? Why are you scared? You scared of me. You over here talking about criminal justice reform, right? You talking about getting people to not be fearful. You are fearful of young black men that want to hold you accountable. It's peak whiteness. Either they're afraid of us on the streets or they're afraid of us in colleges. They're afraid of us in newsrooms. They're afraid of us. There is something about young black men that get in the skin of white people in power. It's funny because I don't have a criminal record, but yet I'm still criminalized. Politicians every day say to me, "You causing trouble? You a troublemaker." My white colleagues don't get called that. They don't get called troublemaker in the same way. They don't get labeled in the same way. And I always thought it was interesting that I will always be criminalized. Like the way that people would describe me would always be in this very criminalizing way. And some of it, yeah, I do my shit, right? But it's interesting how I'm described because my other, in a national sense, right? White reporters who cover Trump, courageous, fighting for free press. I don't get that. I don't get that when I do the work I do. Oh, you started in trouble. Started in trouble or doing my fucking job? Oh, you a troublemaker. Well, guess what? Call me a good fucking troublemaker. Call me an angelic troublemaker. Call me that. Put some respect on it. But what this tells me is that even though it is frustrating because so much time and energy, resources put to put this together, how disgusting for it to happen. What it has done is it has reiterated to me that even when I think I am, just doing, some journalism, just chilling, I'm still a threat to the paces of power. And the reality is that that's what this is about in some ways, right? It's to afflict the afflictors. And the crazy part is that Krasner could have did this debate and he would have still won his primary. But the ego of it all speaks volumes. I don't make endorsements. I'm not making an endorsement for any of these candidates. I'm covering the race. I can't do it. What I will simply say is that elections is about character judgment. And it is about policies, but it's also about character. And I think sometimes in politics, we don't look at people's character enough. We're too busy looking at how they dress, how they talk. But personal character is also is an important trait. And I think that Krasner's actions and the way he went about this is a lapse in his personal character. Several of his supporters who are close to him told me this. They said, "Hi there, I saw your post. Let me tell you his reaction when I called to tell him that my ward voted to endorse his opponent. It's a shame. The hypocrisy, very Trumpy. I'm sorry that all happened to you in PABJ. It would have been a great event for voters." I agree. Another person told me they're surprised, but politically it makes, from an accountability standpoint, not so much. They're surprised, but politically it makes, from an accountability standpoint, not so much, is what somebody has sent me. So many people, so much. Some of this I can't read out loud because they're very descriptive, and I don't want to, implicate people. So much. Yeah, personal character speaks volumes. A lot of you all was saying to me that people can't stand the heat, get out the kitchen. I agree. People can't stand the heat, they gotta get out the kitchen. Somebody said, I guess going to Eid was enough to get the black vote. Wow. Somebody told me that this whole situation is a massive disappointment, and in the end, it's the voters who's going to get screwed. It is not democratic. This situation is not democratic. It's this man praises all day long about stepping up to Trump, but you can't even stand up to journalists. You can't even hold yourself accountable to journalists. But I'm supposed to believe that you're going to stand up to Trump. And okay. look, it is what it is. Um, I do want to acknowledge that I do, I do think that the Dugan campaign having the integrity to reject that cherry pick candidates forum. Again, cherry as in cherry picking, not the name. The coincidence there. To reject that cherry picked candidates forum with Krasner after finding out what his campaign did to ours. Like, to weaponize local media outlets in our industry should be discouraged, regardless of the journalist seeking truth. Um, no candidate, and I truly believe this, no candidate, regardless of political leaning, should get to dictate how the press covers an election. And I think that is so disappointing, that he did that. And it's so unfortunate. It's just such a missed opportunity, and it's so disgusting. And honestly, to anybody who's a supporter of Krasner, by all means, do so. But remember this. And also, what I will tell you all is that this reminds me of somebody else. I'm going to tell this little brief short story. In 2016, I met a woman at a bar called the Pen and Pencil Club. And I was a new writer. Not a new writer, I've been writing, but I was new to my role at Philadelphia Magazine. I was the editor of G Philly, which was the LGBTQ channel and section for Philly Mag. It's bygone now, but it was at the time. The editor-in-chief of Philly Mag at the time was Patrick Kirshner. Yeah, baby, I've been there for 9 years. Patrick's no longer there. He's been left. But at the time, he was editor-in-chief, and I had just got new on the job. I knew about Helen Gim from 2015 when she ran for city council, and she had won. I remember my first like real interaction with her in person. And I was talking to Patrick, and I was having a conversation with him, like talking to him. And she just kind of was around me, and she was very impatient and just had this very dismissive, like, oh my goodness, hurry up. Like, I'm trying to talk to him. Like, it was just almost like she knew who I was. And I just noticed her energy, and I was just like, are you okay? Like, I was like, hey, you good? What's going on? She's like, oh, I really want to, I'm talking, I want to talk to Patrick. I'm trying to talk to him because she loves some media attention. And I was like, okay, well, I'm a reporter. I'm meeting my editor. This is the first time we've talked since I got hired. Like, you can wait. But it was just this level of air and his impatience. But whatever. I moved. I let her talk to him. She was very dismissive. Time passed. I began to move up, in my visibility, my coverage. And she recognizes me at an event. And now at this point, I've become that political reporter, or people start to recognize my work at that point. And then she sees me, and it's a different energy. It's very much like, oh, she's a big fan. She's this, she's that. But I never had forgotten how she treated me before she really knew who I was. I remember her campaign team at the time. She had some black people on her campaign team that I knew. And they were so fucking, obsessed. They were like in a cult. Anything that I was critical about, if I ever say anything critical or anything about how Helen Gim did something, it was, oh, you don't like black people. Oh, you can't relate. Helen Gim is relatable to black folks. She's this, she's that. She's doing a lot of important things, and you got an Ivy degree. You don't understand. You're so elite. You're in the Ivy Tower. I'm like, first of all, I grew up in a working class background. My college tuition at Penn, my parents didn't pay for that. That was tuition covered because of the fact that I grew up in a working class background. We couldn't afford $60,000 a year to go to college. So fuck out of here making assumptions about my upbringing, right? But this was how they were. And they were like attack dogs. They were like, anytime I tweet something, it was just terrible. But they thought she was unstoppable. They told me, oh, we don't need you to like her. We don't need you to cover anything. We're not letting you talk to her. Because the mindset was, Helen Gim is nationally renowned. She's known. She's on top of the world. It is 2025. 10 years later, Where is Helen Yim? Where is she? She forfeited her city council seat, where she was once the highest vote getter, to run for mayor, and she came in third place. There was assumptions about black voters and yada yada, and she was going to get the support. When I told people that I found her to be somewhat disingenuous at times, people said, "Oh no, she's not tone deaf. She's da 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 da." This was the same woman. Then in 2003, after getting endorsed by the Working Families Party at the Octavius Cato statue, that morning, that same night, she went to the Union League. After calling for boycotts, calling it a racist establishment, she went inside that establishment. She stepped foot in there on the same day that she was endorsed by Working Families Party. There were supporters that got mad at me for covering that. They said, "Oh, you're so wrong. You're so this, you're so that, blah, blah, blah." I said, she has a problem with black voters. No, she don't. You got an issue with her. You don't understand her. Look at all the things she's done. She's progressive. She's this. I said, she has a problem with black voters. They didn't listen. When the exit poll showed her low amount of black votes, that the majority of her votes came from the most elite areas, the most prestigious areas, she did not get that working class black vote that she just thought she had with her policies. She didn't get them. Once a front runner, she came in third. Today, the person that once upon a time would be covered in city council every week, that national press, is in many ways persona non grata. The AOC of Philly, gone. I'm not saying that is going to be Krasner's fate this election cycle. I don't know what what his political future is after he potentially might win this upcoming DA's race. But history will show you who a person is eventually. Because who that person is, or who they hide themselves to be, will eventually show up in the most unexpected ways. I have done this for over 10 years. I've seen them come. I've seen them go. I've seen them rise. I've seen them fall. I'll leave it there. Years from now, we'll have this conversation, and I'll say, remember this? Because there's always those moments in history. We see it all the time. Kenny, I said about Kenny. I said, Kenny, And what did Kenny do? We saw what Kenny did multiple times. Where's Kenny now? Exactly. The great white hope will eventually be the great white nope. Hopefully this man comes to terms with himself, humbles himself, reflect on his actions. I don't wish anybody ill will. I just want there to be a moment where people could take some real time to unpack and really think about their actions and what they do. I'm just saying. I done seen it. I done seen people come and go. Here today, going tomorrow. Grand opening, grand closing. Philly is a very unforgettable city. They forget until they can't. And I got something in my gut that the way that when you do wrong, when you do people dirty, when you do people wrong, like when you do people wrong, it's something about that karma. It's something about that karma. And it's I can't tell you how many times I've been fucked over in my life, and I will always learn that the trash will take itself out. I don't got to get a lick back. I don't got to get vengeance. I don't got to hope for nothing bad on anybody, revenge. But the universe always has a unique way of showing and revealing people to people. So I'm just telling my account. Take it, learn from it, reflect on it, think about it. But don't remember this. Don't forget this conversation. Don't forget this conversation. Don't forget this episode. Because something tells me that this is what he's done. This is not the first time he's done this. I might have been one of the few people to go publicly and say it. But this ain't the first time he's done this. It takes courage to speak out. He's probably going to gatekeep me. I probably won't be able to cover the Krasner administration. Not that I had covered it prior aggressively. I mean, they might not return my calls. I have reached out to his office for quotes on a regular basis in the past for certain stories I used to work on, back when Jane Roe was there. And, sometimes they will give a quote, sometimes they won't. I mean, at this point, this guy has a grudge. He's hurt. I did it to him. It's something about me. I don't know. White men, I don't know. It's something I do to them that just get them in their bag. But bless his heart. So that's all. That's all. We got an episode coming up. If updates come, stay tuned. But as always, be well and be best. Ernestly Speaking is recorded in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and can be found on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. To stay up to date with the latest on the show, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Mr. Ernest Owens. Use the hashtag Ernestly Speaking to tell me what you thought about this episode, and check out my website at ernestowens.com.